Wow.
Depends on what you're gonna do with those.
Got really quiet there. I guess we'll go ahead and start.
Just trying to get my last round of candy crushing.
I don't have my gavel.
Get over it.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's still not.
Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone. Absence of gavel, we'll start the meeting. Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council of Universal City, Texas. It is Tuesday, June 21st, 2022. And it's now 6:30 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order and call for quorum check, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Here.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Here.
Councilmember Najarian.
Here.
Councilmember Shelby.
Here.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Here.
Quorum is present, we shall proceed. The invocation this evening will be given by Councilmember Buck. I'll lead us in the pledges afterwards, so would everyone please stand.
Heavenly Father, we stand before you tonight, humble servants of this city, asking for your guidance and wisdom in all we do. We thank you immensely for the blessings that you have bestowed upon us and upon the residents we represent. As we contemplate and direct the affairs of our city tonight, we ask that your will be done. Show us your purposes. Enlighten us that we may know how you want us to accomplish our tasks. We set the goals, but you guide our steps as we seek to reach our ultimate destination. Grant us your vision and wisdom that we might do your bidding this evening. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Well, thank you everyone for coming this evening on this 100+ day. I think it's like day number, honor me over 100, but we're going to get more and more, I think. But thank you for coming this evening. We've got an interesting agenda. I'm glad that you're here to participate with us. I started something last meeting ago. We're going to start recognizing businesses and others for some special things that we do in Universal City. And I know that those of you who were here last meeting, we recognized State Farm. It's having its 100th anniversary and birthday. We have 3 State Farm agents here in Universal City. And so it was like a good neighbor, we honored State Farm with that particular one. This evening, I'm going to take a slightly different direction. And I want to honor, specifically mention some people in our own city staff. And it's very parochial because my granddaughter was part of this. But I want to show you a little short video here and show you that this is related to the golf camp, the junior golf camp that started last week in Olympia Hills. And just show you a little bit, and you just watch these kids. Kristen, you want to roll? That's my granddaughter. She's 7. One of 4 camps that's being conducted this summer. There'll be 3 more. Obviously, last week was the first one. One of the words they had to spell on their day of learning was etiquette, and none of them spelled it right. It's a tough word to spell. Good swing.
cost?
The cost is $175 for each child, each participant. And there were a couple of scholarships that were awarded. I won't show the whole thing, I'll stop it in a minute here, but there was one of the members of the golf commission, his name was Les Keel. They have a special foundation with Les, and he provides, some of that money is provided scholarships for some of the students, some of the kids that may not be able to afford it. And I think there were 3 scholarships awarded this particular time for the kids. Okay, I think we can stop it. I think that's a pretty good example. But this is one of the, I think one of the most fun things that the golf staff does out there is have these times for these young children. And I might say my granddaughter's 7, and I think they ranged in this first week from 7 to 12. And next week, I think, in the last 3 he's got them all already filled with 19, 18, and 17 kids in the classes. So it is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for these children. Sal, our director of golf, is a terrific teacher, and he's got good associates that help him. So I just wanted to recognize the golf group for what they're doing, and a lot of it's on behalf of our kids. Now, again, it is not free. It is something that pays because it takes a lot of staff time. Harrison, Michael, and Sal from the golf shop spend the entire 9 to 12:30 in the morning, 5 days with those kids. So you can imagine how the money would add up. But anyway, I just wanted to do that. And if you in the audience have someone, or organization, group, office, business that you think should be recognized, please let us know. Please let us know. Council is going to be doing the same thing, looking at potential people that we can recognize in our own community. And so this is the start of it. Okay. So just wanted you to see that this evening. All right. So let's go on now to then our tab number 8, which is to consider the minutes of the Tuesday, June 7th, 2022 City Council regular meeting. And we won't do the special joint meeting because those notes have not been completed yet. So it'll be just for the regular meeting of June 7th.
Move for approval.
Motion made by Councilmember Shelby, second by Councilmember Najarian. Discussion? Anyone?
Mr. Mayor, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that there's a couple of small mistakes in there. Specifically that it listed Mr. Maxwell and Ms. Foley were present as the council members for the last meeting.
That's a simple
It's
correction.
been corrected, yes.
Been corrected. The other things have been corrected too. And Mr. Neville, our parliamentarian, has got a couple of changes as well. Thank you very much, both of you. So, motion is made and seconded. Any other discussion with those changes? All right, call for the vote, please, Chris.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
That motion passes. Let's move on then to our next item this evening, which is citizens to be heard. It's a time to provide, as you know, to address council on issues or concerns. It's informative only. No council discussion or action will be taken at this particular time, but it's our opportunity to listen to you, hear your concerns, your comments, your feelings, and it's been very, very helpful to us over the years on City Council to get these inputs. And we have two citizens that have signed up this evening, and I'll call you up in order of your signing. First one is Ms. Kim Eichelhart, ma'am. Again, name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Kim Eichelhart. I live at 736 Garden Meadow Drive. I'm here to speak about the meeting room policy at the library. I am a big fan of policy. I'm a big fan of keeping policy current. I think it makes life easier for everybody when we're all on the same page. Basically, the policy that's written is a really good policy. There are 2 points on there I'd like to ask you to consider tweaking, if you would. One has to do with the idea that library events can preempt reservations. So like if an organization reserves a room, then the library can come and bump it off and say, no, we need a room, you can't use it. I understand that happening during business hours when the library is open, because it is first and foremost a library. But after hours, I think we should draw a distinction, because after hours, that library then becomes the only civic center that we have. And it's hard to plan an event thinking, well, what if? And if 2 weeks before, suddenly you get bumped off and you get told, oh no, we can't, we need room for something else, then you're scrambling, like, where am I gonna find room for free? Your publication, the media's already been put out, everyone already knows where we're going and everything else. Obviously, the election exception, which is already addressed in the policy, needs to remain, because elections, of course, are right up there first with everything else. The other issue I'd like to ask you to consider tweaking would be the hours for after-hour operations. It says that it's only through the hours of 9 p.m. at night. If you plan an evening event for 7 o'clock, and you have to allow time to put the room back together afterwards, according to the schematic that they give you, time to take out the trash, time to get all the mingling people and push them on out the door, you pretty much have to wrap that up no later than 8:30, which doesn't even give you a full 2-hour meeting time. So I don't know if there's a reason why it can't go until, say, 10 or 10:30. I think that would be reasonable. So I'd like to ask that you consider those 2 points. Now I am going to need to be leaving. I apologize. It's no disrespect or anything like that. I would like to ask that you consider these 2 points when you address the policy this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you. Okay, very good. Thank you, ma'am. All right, this individual who signed up second was Mr. Tom Maxwell.
Now this is a very weird sensation. Crap. There's people back here. I didn't realize how nervous it is to be sitting on this side of the dais. Mayor, Council, I'm Tom Maxwell. I live at 1251 Seminole Trail, Universal City. I'm a 25-year Universal City resident and taxpayer. Over the past 18 to 24 months, I've noticed a larger than normal amount of negativism towards the management of UC. In fact, repeatedly, a few residents have made it their primary focus on providing any and all negative facets imaginable for any situation to the council. It seems they have a problem for every solution. I want to change that by highlighting positive aspects of the Universal City, very much like the mayor has come forward with, recognizing some of the different departments. We can also address this by full transparency, addressing citizens' concerns. I do not want to ignore the issues. There will always be issues. But presently, we're ignoring all the great things Universal City is providing, and sometimes the negatives are just plain the cost of doing business. With that being said, I'm going to be asking tonight for 2 considerations. Number 1, I feel the City Council, as a council, may need to add part-time position to the upcoming budget in order to make some of the additional payrolls. Not only by this request, by some of the actions being taken at this point in time. Papers stick together. I'm requesting that, first of all, I'm going to use it a little bit here. There's been an uptick in the Freedom of Information requests over the past 2 years. I want to know exactly what this is costing Universal City, what it's costing our taxpayers. So I'm suggesting that on the agenda for future meetings, there will be an agenda item placed that requests the number of hours dedicated to researching Freedom Open Records Acts, also the number of Open Records Acts requested during the time period, either from meeting to meeting or on a monthly basis, the dollar figure in labor, and any benefits brought into the city as derived from that. Now, I said I was going to ask for 2 items. I'm actually going to just do 1. I'm going to hold 1 back for future and see how we go with that one. I just want to remind the council of one thing. You represent 20,000 residents. 1% of the residents will not fit in this room. It's 200 people. And a lot of the negative that we've been harping over the last 2 years, it's true. There are negatives. But a lot of it is cost of doing business because we're running a city. And it is our responsibility, your responsibility, city manager's responsibility to provide safety, health, welfare, morale to the residents. And if there's a cost of business to do it, there's a cost to do that. We did the camp, the splash pad. This weekend's Big in the Park in the water park fiesta. Now, we had a nominal charge for them, but these are all items. We have a cost, and we did charge the citizens, but there's still a break even in there. In order to provide that, we have to do these things. So please, consider my recommendation. I'll be back with some other items over the next few months, and make some other recommendations, even to the point that if we feel that you're not doing your job, let's go to the Attorney General's office and file an official complaint. Thank you very much, and I apologize for going over.
Thanks, Mr. Maxwell. Okay, anyone else would like to address council that didn't get a chance to sign up on the sheet this evening? Everybody good? Okay, fine. Let's go ahead to our business items. And what I'm going to do, actually, tab number B, we're pulling the presentation on the PUD concept plan by Athenian and Centerbook. For those that are directly involved, they couldn't have their entire team here this evening, so we're going to pull that and present it at another date. And then I'm going to move tab D up in front of tab C. So that's related to the library, and then we'll have the PUD concept plan on FM 1976 after that. So tab D is to consider resolution 889-C-2022, resolution adopting revisions to the meeting room policy and adopting an activity room policy and study room policy for the municipal library of the city of Universal City, establishing legislative findings, providing an amendment and adoption, and setting an effective date. So, Michael, Sato will take over.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, it's a meeting room policy that's being proposed, and I'm going to allow the library director to give you a quick summary and answer questions that you have.
Please, come on up. Why don't you introduce yourself? I think some in the audience, well, the library friends do know you, but others may not know you.
I am the new director. My name is Christina Blumenthal. I came actually from down the road from Randolph, so I've worked in a few military libraries and a few public libraries as well as overseas as well. So yes, I'll go over the meeting room policies. Just a quick synopsis of why we wanted to have these. So first, for the meeting room, we already had an existing one, so we're just updating it to the existing ones that are in yellow on the pieces of the copies that you have. So the reflections or the revisions reflect updated hours for use. So we did put the hours on there. A lot of these are very similar to the libraries in our area. So Schertz libraries, the Eaton libraries, San Antonio Public, a lot of those are about the same because I want to get the rooms pretty much on par to the other libraries as well. The revisions also reflect the established occupancy numbers for the fire code, which didn't exist before, updates to acceptable use of the spaces, and updates to the meeting room reservation requests, which we have tried to streamline to make more organized for myself and for the staff as well, because we have a very small staff, and it'll help us move along with business better. As far as the activity room and study room policy, those are completely new. Again, those kind of follow the same concepts as other libraries in our area and around the nation. So the activity room policy is the second largest space in the library right now, and it didn't have any policy for use. Why we wanted this is because it has AV equipment in the room. There's television and furniture, and usually when people use that, you just have to have a policy for acceptable use in case things happen in the spaces, which they sometimes do. And it also establishes the room occupancy numbers, which we did not have before, so that way we don't crowd too many people in one space. And it also establishes more acceptable use, so it follows similar to the meeting room, where we also have established a reservation policy, so it helps the staff and helps keep things more organized. And the study room policy, we only have 2 small little study rooms, but that's also new as well. So it's also intended just for quiet, small study group work and establishes rules for acceptable use that did not exist before. And again, this follows similar policies to other libraries in the area that have study rooms. Schertz Library is such an example. It is very similar to theirs. We had to have this established because we had minors using the space. They were misusing furniture in the room, being destructive. And we also have individuals using the rooms for commercial sale purposes, which are not allowed in public library spaces. So that's just a general synopsis of the meeting room policies and the study and activity room policies.
Do you have any specific questions, sir? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, like Ms. Eilhart had brought up, was the hours of operation and the 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Is there a magic to the number?
9 o'clock, we are a library first and foremost. Again, like I said, it follows similar libraries, so we're different in that most libraries do not have their meeting spaces open past after hours. They can only be for use past up to the point where they're open. Most libraries close at 9 o'clock. We also put the meeting room at that time too because it's accessible by a key card. So it's also for safety purposes as well. And like we have such a small staff, so to try to give that more of a streamline. And 9 o'clock, like most events that happen in libraries are not going to be parties or anything of that nature. It's usually groups coming together for meetings or having an event of some sort that is not in that nature. So most things don't go past 9 o'clock, so we had that a firm time for that in there.
Okay, and then her other comment was the idea of bumping somebody who was scheduled for, if I reserved it for whatever, and what would y'all have that would bump me?
Usually we don't, but sometimes we will. It is our space, the library space, library programming, summer reading, all the events that we do and put on, sometimes need to come first.
Is there a time limit in there? Like you won't bump me within 2 weeks of my event so that I can?
Yeah, we would always try to accommodate. So we're not saying that, but sometimes things do happen where we would have an event. Like let's say we had somebody that wanted to come in and do something for the community and they could only do it at a specific time if we had a vendor or something. Like our summer reading program performers are ones, sometimes we can only get them at certain times, and if we know that it'll be great for the community, then we'll have to bump something like that. But it would be very rare, because that's why we wanted to have these processes and policies and reservations in place. That way we can make sure that we accommodate and not push people out, because our last thing we want to do is actually push people out of the reservation that already have a reservation.
I mean, if we, I appreciate that, and I'm just curious if it's something that we would we entertain the idea of adding, I won't bump you within, 7 days of your event type of situation, just to make sure that, because I have run groups and I have been bumped, and so I'm standing out front waiting for parents to show up to drop their kids off with my group, and now I'm bumped and trying to figure this out. So I'm trying to eliminate that as an issue. And if we gave them a 72-hour, a 7-day window, if that would fit with your working area, we could put it into the policy and then move forward.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Most of this was from my staff input, just because of they have a program they want to do, and like I said, being that it's a library, first and foremost, it's for our programs, and we're trying to keep up our programs as well. But like I said, we try not to do that. We don't want to do that to anybody, so that would be fair.
No, I understand, and don't blame Kim for that one. That one, I totally got bumped and was so mad about it. So.
I understand.
But not from the library.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Adjournment.
Yeah, I was kind of following on what Vera brought up, the times of bumping and everything. That was a concern for me that Ms. Eilhart brought up. Seemed like not great policy. I could see that happening, where you make plans and all of a sudden you're there and all of a sudden, sorry, can't accommodate you, and then you're shuffling around. We want to avoid that. Your answer was real good about that. But also, she had brought up, and I don't know if I heard that correctly, bumping, library bumping after hours. So my question being, if somebody was bumped for an event, a library event, do the events normally just run the library hours, or could that possibly run into overtime to the 9 o'clock? In other words, being able to keeping the bumping out of that time after.
Right. We normally don't do programs that are not during our scheduled hours. So I wouldn't worry about that because it's Sundays and Mondays that we're closed right now. It's probably just a in between because the library doesn't have a set schedule for hours. We can always change them and flex them as we go along. But we usually don't bump anybody. We do our programs usually during our normal operating hours.
Because again, I think that was a good concern that comes bear on if we can, work this to have some kind of wording in there that within a certain amount of time, just so for a little clarity on that. Going on to my next one, and it's small, and maybe it's just me, but it's just the way I read. Page 3, and this was nothing that was actually changed, but it says reservation requests may be made by an adult over 18 years of age. For me, that means, well, you have to be over 18, we have like 19. I just, for clarification's sake, get a change to make that 18 years of age or older.
That can be interpreted either way, but that's a good point.
But anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Shelby, and then Mr. Vaughan.
Oh, I think you should do your hand.
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, yes, go for it. I'm just curious, so on the after hours meetings, there's no staff has to come check it. So just to make sure that they put it out at the right time, right? So if somebody wanted to rent until 10, it doesn't take any staff time, right?
Well, we still have to check the room the next day. So yes, we have to make sure that everything is in order and that the policies are followed, that we go walk the room, make sure there's no stains or something or any trash that hasn't been taken out. So we still have to do that. And normally we have programs when we come back, especially if it's over a weekend, so Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday we're writing short programs. So that does take some of our staff time to go through there and make sure that everything's set up the right way that it should be. So if it's not, then we have to bring in some of us and put it back in order the way it needs to be.
And that would still happen if they were there till 9, right?
Yeah. So we just ask that everybody put back the furniture the way it's supposed to be in the diagram, because it helps us. There's only 5 of us there, and 3 part-timers. So.
Okay, and then the occupancy was changed from 120 to 76. And I was just curious, was that something changed with the room or?
Fire code, that was the established fire code. It was not on, it was incorrect on the first one. So I discussed that with the building reps and the fire marshal, and it's actually 76. That is the established one on the record.
Okay, Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking to the room being open later, are you ever in a situation where somebody may have checked out the room in a period of time and something isn't working right, and you guys are the ones that have to come down there and deal with it? Or is it kind of, the room is the room, whether it's working or not? I mean, the staff is not going to have to come in at 8 o'clock at night on their day off to deal with that. Is that the case, or is that not the case?
Normally, no. That's what I made those reservation forms for, because it'll indicate if you need audio-visual equipment. That would be like the PowerPoint projector and everything. And so at the time the person fills out the form, we would go over that with them and ask them, do you need anything? And then we can show them how those things work, where they're located, how to use it, and everything beforehand. And then at that point, they're responsible for the use of it.
Okay, so it's not one of those situations where if it is something that goes past 9 o'clock that they could put a new demand on the staff after hours?
Not so.
Okay. Any other questions? Let's go on here real quick. I can't remember what this is. I'll pass for now.
Okay, so we've had some discussions, and there's a couple of potential modifications if that is appropriate. If anyone would like to make a motion, they certainly can. If we can take the discussion over
I
there.
have one thing, talking about tobacco products. I don't see anything about vapors. It's like fuel, which I think should be in there. When we talk about tobacco products, alcohol, and liquor.
We could add that in there if you want to be more specific. I'm totally good with that. I know sometimes tobacco kind of covers that, but vaping I know is kind of weird.
Well, maybe clarify to add to include vaping so there can be no potential confusion.
Right.
Yes,
I remember my question. So I did read this. This went through the library committee, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did they have any input or any concerns or questions about any of this, or is what they
what they came up with pretty much verbatim in here.
Yes, this is pretty much what we all agreed to.
So this has already been through one committee already.
Yes, it
I
has.
see a bunch of nods out there.
That's why, yeah.
We're
So
all actively involved in the process.
I want to be clear. I mean, this is not something that you came up with on your own and unilaterally put into a document. This is something that you guys work together with the library board and put this together as a committee and recommendations
Yes.
for everybody here. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Buck?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, the horse is nearly dead, but I'm going to beat it another couple of times here about the finishing time. If your staff has to come in the following business day to inspect the room, is there really a difference whether the function ends at 9 o'clock and they made a mess, or whether it ends at 10 o'clock and they made a mess, or whether it ends at 11 o'clock and they made a mess? I think the point that everybody's making here is that the mess is going to be made one way or the other, and it's going to wait until the following business day for it to be discovered and then cleaned up. I do believe that we're being potentially a little too restrictive. If the room is going to be used, people will either use it responsibly or they will use it irresponsibly. And whether the cutoff time is at 9 p.m. or whether it's at 10 or 11 p.m., I'm not sure that that's going to prevent a mess from being made. Would you entertain, between you and the library committee, extending those hours from 9 p.m. in the evening until 10 or 11 p.m. in the evening to allow for those civic functions that are taking place that end at 9 o'clock if somebody reserves it for 7 to 9 and then they have to put everything back together? You see what I'm saying? Would you consider extending those hours? Thank you.
I would like to discuss with the advisory committee with that one. Like I said, it's still a library first and foremost, so I put that ending time is the same as a lot of other libraries in the area. So that's why I added that 9.
So,
Sorry,
it is attached to the library, but it's also a universal city meeting room. So it's the only real room in Universal City that I'm aware of, that besides this room potentially, where the residents could get together to hold any of their civic functions. Is that correct? So although it's attached to the library and the library uses it for many of their functions, it also serves that additional purpose of being a meeting and civic room for the residents of Universal City.
It does. However, it is still our responsibility. So if somebody does, let's say we have a big mess in there, our carpet cleaning does cost about $3,000. So if that does happen, that falls under our purview, and then we then have to take care of it. So trying to just mitigate some things, and being so close to the park at night too, I know that it can get a little, violent up there, but that's, I guess, because it falls under us as well, and we have the ultimate responsibility of that place. So,
is there a provision in the user agreement that the user is responsible for any damage to the room? So if they did damage the carpets and it cost you $3,000, then you would make a good faith effort to recoup those funds from the person who made the reservation?
there is something in there, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So hopefully, if that would happen, that would be the case. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. I have worked in libraries where that did not happen for a few of them, but yes, that is in there in case that does happen.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my only concern about it going past 9 o'clock is it is kind of in the middle of a community residential area, and this is not a business. If we needed a place that was open later, they could easily rent space at the golf course. I mean, and I'm reading this right, they don't have to pay to use the space. So this is a free space that we're offering to be used just about any time that's not being used, and even including when when the library's closed up till 9 o'clock. I think that's very generous, to do that, and I think it's great that we do that. But I think if we're getting to something where we're having some kind of event that goes late, perhaps they should consider one of the event centers. When I realize there's a cost, but if we know that the library, if the facility closes at 9, then we probably shouldn't schedule the start at 7. It's just kind of my thought. It's a library. It has an event room in it. We're renting it out. I'm sorry, we're allowing it to be used for free with some stipulations. I think if you need a space and you want it guaranteed and you want to use it late, we have event centers in the city that you can make use of. I realize they have a cost to them, but just want to make sure we're balancing out the difference between an event center, an event room that is free for use by the citizens.
There's another item I'll bring up before I give here and there. But
I'll move to approve the way it is right now. Just we can get
all right, there's a motion to
I'll
approve
second.
the proposal as written.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Goolsby. I just want to add one other quick thing is that it is at no cost, but it's at a cost to the city. Because we run the electricity, everything else that takes place there, that is an overhead cost that we're responsible for, obviously, as the city. So the longer that it would stay open, that could be an impactor as well. And I agree, I think the idea of, it is in a residential section, and I would be surprised if a lot of meetings would take longer than 2 hours for functions. If they were, then there are other avenues. We're blessed to be able to have a room like this that we can offer to our citizens for free. It's pretty cool. Yes, we're still open for discussion. We have a motion and a second that we can still discuss.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, I kind of agree with, oddly enough, with Councilmember Shelby because I would start my meetings earlier if I needed to accommodate that noon, 9 o'clock. And the idea that we're the library shuts down at 9, so now I kind of get that, and I told it, because I'm going to behave better if I know you're there. So I'm going to behave better. And so, but I'm going back to my thing that affected me, was I would like to see a 72-hour. You're not going to bump me within 72 hours, 24 hours. And I'm looking at the library committee as well, just to see if I get any like evil staring, if that's too much or if that's even an option. I mean, I don't work the library committee, and I don't understand. I don't know how much you're dealing with, but I know what has affected me as a group leader that got bumped, and then totally looked like I had no idea what I was doing because I didn't at that point in time. I did not have a backup plan because I didn't even know I could get bumped. Would you be willing to add a 72-hour or to discuss it with your group to add a 72-hour?
Yeah, I would discuss it with them. I definitely would. And these are all new, very, very new. And like I said, we have a very small staff. And so we're trying to get used to new processes and I'm trying to ease them slowly into things. But I understand.
You can always bring it back to us. We can always adjust it if need be. Right. Yes.
And to be clear, even if we approve it tonight, that doesn't mean you can't come back in 2 weeks later and say, hey, you know what, we appreciate that you approved it, but we want to make an additional based upon information.
Yes,
but if anything, to get you something in writing to address several of the problems that you have right now, I would hate to table this or put it off if you guys are willing to go back and make a couple of tweaks based on the communications we've heard tonight.
Yes.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chair.
And based on what Barrett said too, considering a 72 to 48 hours, just give somebody the opportunity to be able to change their plans on the fly, whatever it takes. I would like to see added too, but if that's stipulation, and I know what you think about my changing on the 18. That's really no good. That's just me.
Okay. All right, we do have a motion and a second, Mr. Neville.
You said as written, but we need to make sure that they add that about the vape.
About the vape. Yeah, that's one thing we do want to make sure that you would add that. The motion including, let's say, the tobacco.
I'll amend my motion to make sure to include the change to include a prohibition and no vaping. Or just no vaping, included into the...
Sometimes that does get confusing to people. Well, I'm not smoking, so I think clarifying that probably would be really good thing to do. Okay, very good. Any other discussion? Okay, Chris, call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 5-1. We'll move on. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, let's move on to the next item on the agenda under business, which is tab number C, is presentation of the planned unit development PUD concept plan related to the Farm Road 1976. So, Mr. Sada, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have a few slides. If you looked at the packet, This is a property that is located across from the Hop and See on FM 1976. As the aerial photo shows, it's backs up against the railroad tracks. It's approximately 20 acres. And so backs up to the railroad tracks, extends to Gibbs Sprawl, basically right next to the underpass, 1604. And on the western side, across the street is the Hop and See gas station. And then the Springwood single-family subdivision is across the street. It's important for us to note that this property is currently zoned C4. And within the C4 district, the proposed use of office, warehouse, and outdoor storage is a permitted use by right. When the developer and his team came in and talked to us initially, we discussed the potential for a plan unit development, which would allow staff to work with the developer and basically achieve a win-win for the city and the developer. Understanding that they could go in by right and utilize the entire property for office and outdoor storage. What the developer is proposing is a mixed use, so not only the office warehouse / outdoor storage, but also to allow for some flexibility at the corners, primarily across from the Hop and See, with the potential of a retail or a healthcare office, something of that nature. It would allow for the city and the property owner to achieve the highest and best use for that property. So I will turn it over to the developer, who will give a presentation. He'll go through the site plan and the elevations, things of that nature, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Remember, they're asking feedback from us as to what we see in our own minds about this initial concept that they're presenting. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
So this is our concept right here. I have in front of me, y'all have it on the screen. We're doing, the idea is to do a 12,000 square foot building, divisible by 2, with outdoor storage to allow for smaller local businesses to be able to rent an office space, have some warehouse space, and be able to securely store their stuff outdoors. Just a lot with electricians and companies like that that need to be able to park their service truck in a secure area overnight. Found this piece of land and looking, got pulled 700 pieces of land from Austin to South San Antonio, and this is the one. So it's really, we build nice looking industrial buildings and we end up selling. The goal is we think we're going to end up selling about 50% of these to end users. So the guy that is in the building will be the guy that, 50% of these, the guy that's in the building will be the guy that ends up owning it. From our looking at like Bell North Street over in Shirks, they've been in existence now for about 10 years and they've fallen out at about 50-50. Here are the elevations of it, of what we're proposing to do. In order to break up having just no one wants to look at a big metal building. We've kind of given the 2-level approach. Lots of windows, lots of coverings over the windows. We've popped out for y'all's, of course, for y'all's design standards to hit your vertical and horizontal articulations. Most of the front would be, it's called U panel. It's a different shape metal panel than an R panel, which is what you see for a lot of metal buildings. We've turned it sideways. It gives it a more contemporary look than just a classic metal building. And then over the entrance where it says signage, we're discussing doing something like Trex or wood, which is what the guy that cuts my checks wants to do. So the big boss. We're going to do, so that'll give it a third kind of design feature in there. The interior you can't really see in this schematic presentation. It does have 4 doors so that each tenant would have their own side. Or if one guy takes the whole thing, he'll just have 4 doors up front. I think if you go up one, we're down. So in order to fence off and secure the yard up front, we're going to go with we propose to do a nicer fence than chain link. It's called Design Master. You see it a lot down in, we probably use it a lot up here, but we see it a lot down in Mexico. It's a welded wire that is very difficult to scale. It is very rushed. It's welded wire with 2 coatings over top of it to prevent it from rusting, so it ends up lasting for a very long time. Just a very attractive, newer take on the old style chain link. There's a couple pictures of it there. We wouldn't do the branch out thing, but just take it up straight. People can't climb it. It's hard to get through. I also included a picture of a gate. That's the kind of gates that we'd be putting in for the facility to secure the backyard. So, if you scroll into the top, you can see the elevations in the site plans. In the green areas, you're good? So loading docks in the back, drive-in ramps in the back for doing warehouse uses, and then office up front. The blue area, we propose to just have straight C4 zoning. I think we might, after speaking with Michael, we might go back and ask to add commercial off-street parking, which my understanding is the difference between the electrician who uses his trucks for his business and a business whose use is the trucks, if that makes sense. And then in the green areas where we can't put any yard in, where there's floodplain, we're looking to add general retail sales, auto sales, healthcare sales, personal services, and especially for the hard corner over there, restaurant. We'd like to be able to put a restaurant in. Right now, C4 doesn't allow for it at all. We hit y'all's parking standards, and we've exceeded them by, I think, 3 spaces. And then the tenant or owner would have all of the backyard space also, for if they need more parking. Other than that, that's any comments?
Okay. Well, we'll open it up now for discussion. Okay. Our councilman they can also let you know what they think and concepts, and that's why you're here this evening.
Yes, sir.
So you can get our feedback. So let's open it up, and I thought Mr. Shelby, then Mr. Najarian, then we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talk to me about the lighting on these buildings. Is it going to be for the front of the buildings and the parking lot? Are we going to be lighting from the buildings out towards the street, or are we going to be lighting from the street towards the building because of that residences that live on the opposite side?
Right. Yes, sir. From the building out, but we have a good grade break from the road down to where our parking lot will be. It's about 5 feet. So we'll be able to use angled wall packs with shades to prevent any foot candle or any excessive foot candles from getting out past the hard property line. Just like we would have to use in any dark sky community.
Okay. And this is more for Michael too. So we're looking at, and the difference between retail and commercial services, there's 2 different zones. I mean, we would desire, I'm assuming, to get some retail zoning in there, correct?
Yes, I think it would be appropriate, especially with the Happen See gas station and those 3 tenant spaces. Would be good to complement that across the street on this property.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that piece of land out there, and I've kind of always wondered what was be going on. I am actually pretty impressed with this plan. I think it utilizes the space well, especially breaking it up. I was also worried about the lighting because of the residents on the other side, but I'm also looking at the heights of the building. Being that close, you have the railroad tracks in the back there. I actually think that your construction there would actually make a small sound barrier for that, actually making it nicer for the residents there. But you've got an area there that's with the 5.78 acres for drainage. breaking up the zoning there to allow for other things. The one thing I saw that I did like, well, the one thing I didn't see that I did like is it didn't say anything about industrial, because I was always thinking of, I hope they don't do anything industrial-wise out here. Because I've noticed as you go farther out, some of those, there's some industry close to homes that just doesn't work. So I'm like the looks of the building. I like the structure of it. I like the availability to different types of businesses, and I like the overall plan. I'm not the technical person like Bear is, and as far as building materials and things like that, but the overall plan.
So if I could just point out
Yes,
that, touching on your point about industrial, so our zoning code does allow for custom manufacturing, which is essentially the light industrial that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a permitted use in the C4 district.
I would not like to see that.
Which is why we wanted to do a plan unit development to work with the property owner.
Okay, anyone else want to offer some comments?
I just want to ask, can you clarify light? I'm sorry, the word you were talking about, the light industrial. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially what he's proposing, open storage and warehousing, we see some of that in the North Lake Business Park. That is different than what you might consider industrial production that has chemicals and the old style and industrial uses. We don't really see that much today, and I don't believe that is what's being located here, especially with the office type buildings that are being proposed. It's really construction, sales, and services is what will the likely users be at this location.
I do have one more question, but I think there was other people that are waiting. So
Barry, we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, just this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You talked about the colors of your gates and your fences, but you didn't really talk about the color of the building. Did I miss that part?
You did not. We are looking at kind of a gunmetal, a darker gunmetal color for the U panel.
Okay.
And then a lighter wood color to accent that for the tower part.
Okay, your drawings that I have tell me that the elevations are an R panel on the front, horizontal R panel system.
Yes. Yes. Should be crossed out and U should be written on.
Okay.
Our panel doesn't lend itself well. My understanding is being turned sideways. It tends to leak.
Didn't like that a lot. And when you were talking about the area where the signage is, were you referring to that entire block? You're looking at running with one of the, basically making that a rain screen with the wood type panel, or were you just talking about the area behind the sign?
The whole area right there where the lines have gotten better.
That entire pop out?
Yes.
You're looking at making that with the
yes.
wood, so it's like a rain screen type?
It would be conditions. Most of it would be conditioned space.
Okay. Again, we're talking about you're talking about a dark gunmetal, and then you're probably talking about a galvanized roof.
Yes, sir.
Now, the back section, are you looking at changing that color as well, or are you plan on sticking with the?
I'd stick with it.
Probably sticking with it.
I don't know that that's in the. Oh, you're talking about the
pop-up.
The pop-up.
At the back.
Oh, I thought you meant the back of the warehouse.
Sticking with the gunmetal, or if you're going to change color around there.
If there's something that complements the gunmetal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're not planning on one big monotonous color of
No. That was the hope too of having the pop-out be more of a wood color, or be some sort of wood color, but it's tracks. It's not wood. To allow for it to break up the whole building, which is, I believe, also the reason for the horizontal and vertical articulations.
Your AC units, are you planning on roof-topping those, or you're going to set them in the back, I'm assuming?
Behind the fence.
Behind.
And then
not in between the buildings, but behind the building.
Behind the fence between the buildings, and then screening it.
Okay, so you will be screening them.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then again, my site plan, it might be a little bit old, but when I was looking at it, and you were talking about plenty of parking. I didn't see any ADA parking or access aisles. Making sure you've taken that into account.
Oh yes.
Okay.
This was a conceptual plan, not a,
Yeah, I always hate that when people are counting spaces, and I was like, okay, that's, thank you very much.
we can write, it'll adhere to all tasks and guidelines.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, at the beginning, I didn't catch your name.
Jack.
Jack, thank you for joining us this evening, Jack. Is it your intention for all of these buildings to look the same, and then you're going to find the tenants? Or are you going to do a build-to-suit type situation where the tenant, based on their type of business, will be able to specify how they wish the interior of the building to be laid out?
So, take your question in a couple parts, if that's okay?
There's a couple, yeah, there was a multi-part question, I apologize.
If you can scroll to the site plan real quick, please. Thank you very much. All the buildings in 4, 6, we will plan to build the 6 buildings in blue first. They will be built spec. We do put in small office to allow for someone to move in right away. And then I've found in doing this that typically someone walks in, just like buying a house, I like this, this has to change. That's been the way that I've done this, because I just can't guess everyone's particular business, but we know that they're going to need a couple of offices and a couple of bathrooms at bare minimum. And then the buildings in green would be our phase 2. And I think that a lot of those will come in as a build-to-suit when someone doesn't quite fit into one of the existing buildings. But the goal is to build the first 6 spec.
Okay, and you talked about a restaurant going in there in one of those areas. Where would is that all
Yes, sir.
Zone number 2?
So zone 2 is everything in green.
Okay. And where would you intend to put the restaurant? If that's part of the concept, or is it whoever wants to move in can make it a restaurant?
We just don't want to, my understanding was, I can't go back and say, hey, our restaurant wants to come in here on the hard corner, can we rezone just the hard corner? That would be that'd be spot zoning, which is not allowed. So I don't know what the restaurant is or anything about it, but in the event that one does come in, we don't want to be stuck saying, no, I'm sorry, you can't have a restaurant here, I gotta build an office warehouse.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Shelby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be clear, I like this. I mean, this is, and I think that's one of the main reasons you're here, is you want to hear whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of developing this. I like what Mr. Najarian brought up about it potentially being a slight sound break for the trains going by, even though your fillings will fall out of your teeth if you live that close to a train track. But I do think that's a great benefit. And if we talked about the lighting. My last concern on this, and then maybe for Michael, would be, I know we've got a side road that goes out onto Old Cimarron Trail, and we've got a bunch of curb cuts that go out on 76, which would all have to be approved by TxDOT to begin with, correct?
The curb cuts on 1976 would have to get approved by TxDOT. The other curb cut needs to be approved by Converse.
Okay, but I think from a safety standpoint, would you foresee, being that there's going to be some garages and some potential trucks going in the back of these buildings, that we would lean them to exit out onto Old Cimarron rather than trying to get out of and turn and get up to speed on 76, which is 45 or 50?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way this is being proposed is these are individual lots, and there will not be a cut through at the back towards the tracks. So it won't be continuous. There'll be individual lots that are fenced in. And so, for example, the middle lots, phase 1, they would not be able to exit on Old Cimarron. They would have to exit on 1976.
That would be my only concern. I mean, especially if it's any kind of, I guess looking at the lot plan, and I'm not really good at stuff that's that small on scaling, of knowing whether a truck with a trailer could safely get out on a 76.
We looked at putting a spine road in on the back.
Okay.
And it made being told that the 1 acre yard to 12,000 square feet is the sweet spot. And in order to get your swings for a 18-wheeler, which does work in here, it's not we don't believe many of these tenants will actually have 18-wheelers coming in.
Okay.
It's not quite a big enough warehouse for them to be offloading and dealing with 18-wheelers. The swing meant you had to move the gate up so far that it took up the majority of the yard.
Okay. That's if the design does not lend itself to those larger vehicles, then that's fine. That's the main thing. I'm concerned with somebody trying to pull out on 76.
All of the lots in the front do connect back down to get to Old Cimarron.
All the lots in the front. Okay.
So that all the parking
But
lots.
so they could come through the cut and then turn left and go over that way?
Yes, sir.
So we could direct truck traffic. That's what I was saying. We could direct truck traffic over to Cimarron Trail, which is a less traveled road and more as a light available for them to be able to make left or right turns onto.
And that is what everyone that we have taken out there said. I think I'd go up here and turn to the left, turn the light.
So, that sounds good in theory, but if that corner lot on Converse
Is a restaurant?
That's gonna negate them wanting to drive through their butts.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Something to explore, for sure.
Okay. Just thinking ahead. I mean, like I said, if it comes back to that the lot design does not lend itself to the types of vehicles that would have a hard time getting up to speed or would have to cut across both lanes of 76 to make that turn, then it's less of a problem. So I just, like I said, I don't have a ruler and I don't do this every day, so I depend on you all for that.
We're on a very small scale here for 20 acres also.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other thoughts or observations? Yes, Barry?
I've got one last one, and just to make, I'm going to piggyback on what Councilmember Shelby said, and that was that I am excited about this. It'd be nice to have something being developed, but my fear is that you would turn around and not you, but the big boss would turn around and just make one big homogeneous metal building with no variation, and that's not at all in the spirit of our.
Oh yeah, I mean I feel like if I turn that in, you'd say, well, why did you come here tonight?
Okay, all right. So just making sure that material variations, material color changes, that sort of thing is going to be important in the next steps.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So one question off of what he said. So we have an opportunity to review this again when it comes time to actually.
Yes.
Right. So I just want to make sure so that this isn't the last time we'll see this. So if for some reason you do go to your big boss and he says, "I want a big building," you come back in here, you're going to come back in front of us and we're going to go, "That's not what you talked to us about."
Well,
yes.
the next step in the process would be go through P&Z.
Correct. Yes. So
And eventually to us.
Eventually we'll come back again.
Yes.
So we can get as we get closer to the breaking ground of we'll know what the final design is.
yeah, it'll come back to you at least once.
Okay.
But first we'll go to P&Z.
That's
Okay. Any
Thank you
other
very much.
observations or something you'd like to leave with Jack here?
That's great.
Okay, I think you got some ideas, thoughts
Yes,
about
sir.
where council's coming from, and the general consensus. I think this is a good potential use for that property, for sure. And so, good luck to you.
Thank y'all very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is under business is a NOTAB, and that is discussion regarding a codes review committee. So we brought to us by Councilmember Vaughan at our last meeting, so we brought bringing it up as a discussion item for this evening. So I would like to see if Mr. Vaughan would like to kick this off, and we'll go from there. Phil?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members, for approving this as a discussion item. I know we all know this, but I just want to give a brief history so we're all on the same page. The city put together a list of codes that was started from the International Code Council, which is thousands of professionals get together and decide what they think is reasonable codes. And then the city took that and added some additional things on top of that. The importance of those codes is that that's what our permits grade us on, that's what our inspectors grade us on, and so we as the public policy setters have to weigh what the city provides, which is going to lean towards safety, versus what also our residents and contractors think is feasible and reasonable in circumstances. And so as an example, the ICC talks about what requires a permit. And so they say there are certain exceptions, like you don't need a permit for a fence under 7 feet, or you don't need a permit for retaining walls less than 4 feet, or sidewalks and driveways if they meet certain requirements. But then the city wants to say that, no, everything needs a permit, so there's no exceptions. There's also things like, and Councilmember Goolsby brought this up at the meeting, that if you change your name on your certificate of occupancy, you have to get an inspection, and they could potentially force you to upgrade to a new code cycle if your building was built on an old code cycle. So I think it's important that we get stakeholder input, not just from the city, but also from residents and contractors in the area. And I think creating a committee that could go and get that stakeholder input and bring it back to us for consideration would be prudent. At the same time, they could be reviewing our permit process and our inspection process and seeing if there's things that could be improved in there as well. We're talking to all the stakeholders, not just the city. Our city manager brought up to me, I didn't know this, that municipalities over 100,000 are required to have these stakeholder meetings, and it takes them sometimes a year to get codes adopted. So we're not obviously under that requirement, but it's in the same spirit that we get more input before we say that storage facilities over 2,000 are required to have fire sprinklers instead of what the ICC recommends, which is 12,000 square feet. So if we're going to make a requirement like that, I think it would be good to talk to some of our storage facilities in town that are over 2,000 square feet and get their input. How hard would it be to put in a fire sprinkler if they had to upgrade the codes? So I'm asking tonight for the rest of the council members to take your temperature on if you have any interest in hearing from a committee that might get stakeholder input. I think they could call the city contractors or contractors that are willing to work in Universal City and get their input. I think they could, assuming there's no privacy issues, they could talk to the last several permit holders that pulled the permit and ask them what the city did well, maybe what we could do better. And they could bring that back to with an actionable list of things that we could work on. So I'll yield and hopefully hear what your thoughts are on some endeavor like this.
Okay, reactions, thoughts regarding this potential proposal? Yes, Paul.
Just a question. What type of people were you envisioning being on this advisory committee? Like professionals, or just like residents? I mean, some people don't really know about codes. I don't know if they have any, certain inputs, or just a cross section of what are you thinking?
Well, I think that would be for us to judge based on what they bring back to us. So obviously, I think we would be looking for volunteers to do this. And so I don't know what the qualifications of people who might volunteer would be. But the idea is that they would be talking to people that do have qualifications, the contractors that want to work in Universal City, and they would be bringing back to us and say, these are what some of the contractors told us that might be difficult from these codes or might be beneficial. And then we would be evaluating, do we think these are good recommendations based on what they've checked out?
So a mix of both, professionals and people from the community that are part of this community.
Right. I don't think it's realistic that we're going to get code experts to volunteer on the committee to make up an entire committee. But a lot of these things are not necessarily technical in nature. We're talking about someone replacing their fence. I think we could all have an opinion on whether that would need to have a permit or whether we can allow someone to do that without a permit. I think that's not necessarily technical. Now, some of them, when we're getting into fire codes, are fairly technical, and those are harder to necessarily evaluate. But I don't think that's a reason not to allow people to provide input, and then we can determine whether we think their input is good input or poor input. That's it.
Okay. Glenn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I personally think that any code that is put together by a fire official or building official, somebody who has high qualifications and requirements in order to put their seal of approval or put their recommendations on, and based upon experience, incidences, understanding something as simple in the public safety world is, yes, a building over a certain amount of square foot, we want a sprinkler system in it because, well, we have a fire department with, 6 firefighters. And everybody else we have to wait to come in either from home or from a municipality next to us who we have a mutual aid agreement with. So there's a longer response time. So you look at the larger the building, the more likely of a fire if it were to break out a sprinkler system, and how much further we get along by the time we got there, got a ladder up in the air, hit a hydrant, got out of the city to come in, bring another ladder in. I know I'm focusing on fire, but that's my background. So I don't think citizens are qualified to make those calls. I think we need professionals who are bringing their expert opinions in when it comes to that. Fences, I don't care. I'm spending $5,000 on a fence. I don't care if I got to spend $80 to get it. A permit so that the city says that my fence is the right height and the right kind of construction, it's safely built, whatever. I didn't look at read the permit of everything's checked. I don't know. I'm not the code official. But that code has been around for ages, and so looking at something like that, I think that's something the council can discuss and bring our opinions and talk to the city officials on that one. I don't think we need an entire committee of a separate group of people to go through that. I think that's one of the things that we can do and we can discuss and we can change with just the 7 of us when needed up here. I'm more concerned of citizens bringing in the complication of having to get a permit, the complication of, I want to build X, and the contractor that I have hired to do that job says the city's codes make it too complicated for me to do the work. Well, then I probably don't want that guy doing the work. I can go to a different contractor and find out if they will do the work. Now, if I go through 5 or 8 contractors and none of them will touch it because of the code, yeah, that's a problem. I'm probably going to come in. I don't sit up here. If I didn't sit up here and come in and say, hey, I've reached out to 10 different contractors to build a shed, whatever, on the back of my house, and the codes do not allow this to happen. How do I get around this? Well, I'm probably going to be told to get a variance from the Board of Adjustments to get around that, which we have a mechanism in place for. Or it's an unsafe building and I probably shouldn't build it in the first place. I am not qualified to make that decision. My contractors are all about building, and I expect them to build and design a safe building, but maybe there is something that I'm asking them to do that doesn't match with the codes. So I want to make sure we don't end up with I feel like our codes are too difficult. I expect the information that comes from our building officials, from our fire officials, in the code recommendations that they make, that they're putting their expert opinions in based upon experience and or incidences that have happened in other places and or here that have required us to have a code a certain way. I use a line I heard for the other day, just kind of great. I'm a student pilot, and there's a book called The FAR Aim. It's every rule that's related to flying a plane, and every rule in there was written in black. Somebody died for that rule. I'm kind of the same way when it comes to building codes. We are requiring certain things while they may appear to be overly complex or overly heavy-handed. I trust our building officials to utilize their experience, their training, and their knowledge to apply and present that code to us in such a manner that we can continue to build safe buildings. We can protect our citizens from poor construction or work being done by contractors inside the city. I've had the code compliance out in my house multiple times for multiple things. I don't find it a burden. In fact, I'm glad they do it every time. And that just makes me feel more safe in my house. And I personally, if I had a contractor that said they're not gonna, hey, I can do this without pulling a code, then I'm gonna move on to somebody else. So that's just my opinion. I know it's very long-winded, but I mean, I depend on the city, and I think if we find that our building official is going above and beyond being too heavy-handed, I mean, that's what we're here for, is to talk through those items and address them as they come up. Thank you.
Okay? Yeah, Phil?
Just to be fair, we can't hold our building code official accountable. That's our job to set the policy. So if someone's going rogue, that would really be a city manager disciplinary issue that we wouldn't, I mean, we could request, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they would take that into consideration. And I also think it's important to think that the International Code Council is thousands of people putting what they recommend the codes together. So if the few people here, fire codes is a great example, think that we should go further on the fire codes, it's a few people compared to the thousands that have put the International Code together. So I realize we're not, every municipality is different, and so there are potentially reasons, but I think it's like talking to a doctor. They're gonna say, you can't have that cigarette this weekend. The fire chief is gonna tell us that we should do everything for maximum safety, and that's his job, and that's what he should do. But as public policy setters, I think we should be weighing that with the feasibility of those requirements to making a good public policy. So that's why I think other stakeholder input would be wise.
My only rebuttal to that is that we can ask the city manager to do just about anything we want her to do, and if she doesn't do it, we can fire her.
That's a true statement. The city manager works for the council. Yes, Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So good fences make good neighbors, right? So if my fence is put up and it's according to code, then I trust that, my neighbor's gonna behave until he flies something over top of his fence that I get to talk about every time. I sat there and had, when we went through the code thing, right? I deal with codes every day, right? So I'm in there and I'm in it. But we're not, my initial reaction to this item of discussion was why, right? That was my initial reaction. And then I started thinking, but you're not, there's going to come a day when you decide you're not going to run for council, and then there's going to come a day whenever the people hate you and they're not going to vote you in. And so I would be looking to this body to then go and fight those fights and have those discussions and make those recommendations to the staff that wanted a 500 square foot building to be sprinkled. Fire sprinkler, 500 square foot, had to have a fire sprinkler system. I went and fought that, and I went and we had that conversation, and we met for hours in that conference room. And again, y'all, I feel like that maybe you might have depended on me to help make that decision, and for me to make that fight, and I happily did it. But if I'm not here, and I'm going to ask, somebody to not go and make that, to go make that fight that doesn't know all the rules of the game to make that argument, we would have ended up with a 500 square foot fire suppression system. So I'm starting to understand the idea behind it. But do I want my mother-in-law to come in and be on this thing? No, I don't. She's a wonderful woman, but she doesn't have an idea about building codes. And I think that it's a very viable idea. I'm scared of, I'm concerned, I'm unsure of how we're going to get it there. I don't think it's a committee that's going to come and tell us how we have to vote. I think it's a committee that does talk to contractors. The contractors are out there right now. I talked to a gentleman the other day, and I was like, I'm mad at you. You put your new building just outside the city. You put it in Live Oak. He said, well, Universal City's so hard to deal with. I was like, when was the last time you talked to him? Oh, I've never talked to him. How does that even happen? I understand we have a bad reputation from years ago, but I've got projects now in the city and have had projects in the city that all we have to do is actually talk to our code official, and we've been able to work around the issues. So most construction guys tend to walk around and have a chip on their shoulder. And when our code official comes in with a wealth of information in her head, it frustrates them, and they do get mad about it. So that she will just quote verse to them. I enjoy those conversations, but she will quote verse to them, and that frustrates them. But that's not how we've always done it. Well, you've been doing it wrong, according to the thousands of people on the Code Council. I'm still kind of at a loss on it. This is where I can ask questions of staff, right? It's okay if I ask them?
Sure, in this discussion.
What does our Board of Adjustments do?
They mainly deal with variances, variance requests. So zoning variances, for example, if someone wants to encroach a side yard setback, it would go before the Board of Adjustment. Board of Appeals is different. If a property is condemned, then they can appeal that decision by the building official and go to the Board of Appeals.
If I don't want to put a fire sprinkler system in my 2,500 square foot building, I can go to the Board of Appeals?
Correct.
But those don't always come to the council.
No, that is not the final decision. The appeal from the Board of Appeals goes to district court.
Okay. The other thing about this is with where we are in their city is that it does make it easier for the code official to see construction and know that wow, that was not permitted, right? Bear's got something in his backyard that he shouldn't. So we're going to have to have a talk. Oh, I thought I scared him. Guilt by association. So it does, there's aspects to this that I don't want to overlook and I don't want to do away with. I am frustrated that I have to pull a permit to fix a section of my fence. That does frustrate me. Where you're happy to do it, I'm mad as anything to do it. So, but again, that's my world. There does need to be some give and take. Is it another committee? More government? I don't know yet. I don't think we need to. Please tell me we're not making that decision tonight. This is just a discussion forum, so we can have that talk. Dang it, Phil, you really got me going on this one, and I'm going to turn over. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to put some more thoughts in order.
Okay, good. That's what this is all about. That's what the discussion is all about. Paul?
Yeah, bringing up the Board of Appeals and Board of Review, is there anything that this other committee would do that the Board of Review or Board of Appeals isn't doing now? Kind of like what Bear brought up. I hate to add more to the mix of making a decision on something when it thinks just more hurdles to have to go over. Where I don't know if that making too much government. Is there something that again is something that they would be able to do different than our Board of Adjustments or Board of Appeals is not able to do or is not doing now? I guess is the bottom line.
Right, and what I failed to mention was this is not a perpetual committee. This is a short-term, 6 to 9 months, because we're adopting codes, is to look at the specific codes we have adopted and provide us some feedback of what they heard. And it may be that we get nothing of value back, and then we know we made an effort. And so when someone complains and says our codes are terrible, and we say, well, we made a good faith effort to get your feedback on what is terrible about our codes so that we could possibly fix them. This is not a long-term thing. This is just
that was not brought up.
Yeah, I failed to mention.
Yeah, that's I think an important piece.
So you're suggesting that the next time that we look at the codes, because we've just adopted them, obviously, the next time we look at them again is to have some sort of a group look at them as well as us and provide input?
But preferably before the council would have adopted it, to say, here's some stakeholder input, here's what the city recommends, here's what some of the feedback we got from contractors and residents was, and then the council takes that all into consideration and says we like these or we don't like these. I wouldn't want to wait till the next ones because they were just done, and there's obviously a previous council, so I have a vested interest in wanting to revisit it. But like I said, other cities that are larger are required to do this kind of process. I think it would be good practice for us to do it, like I said, short-term nature, for them to have this committee of volunteers have a directive to say, get us feedback on the codes and maybe our permitting and inspection process, and bring it back to us with a list of recommendations, and then we can scrap them and say, we don't think you did a good job, but thank you for coming. I obviously, if you have no interest in hearing their feedback, and I don't want to do it, I don't want to waste any kind of volunteers' time on this. That's why I think it's a good discussion topic, because if nobody's interested in hearing what they had to say, or if you think the city did a good job already and there's no point in getting their feedback, then so be it. But I think it would be worthwhile.
I'd be interested to see, in some of these cities that have that mandatorily have it, what constitutes this committee? Which types of people are involved with this? Because that's where my situation is do we really need that another level? And I understand where you're coming from. Who would constitute this group? And what would they be able to do that if we receive our input from staff and make a record? Are they going to make something different than we would be, briefed on before we make that decision in 5 years?
Well, I mean, hopefully it would be 5, maybe 6 or 9 months, but I would imagine that they would be whoever we approve to this committee, just the same process we have now. We might solicit people to volunteer with maybe what their qualifications are, and we would pick who should be on that committee. It may be a short list or maybe a long list, I don't know. But hopefully they would have some qualifications, okay. But if they don't, I think it's more of them wanting to put the time in to make the phone calls and ask contractors, are you aware of the 2021 ICC, and do you have any problems with it? And then maybe here's some of the things the city has added on top. Do you have any concerns about those? And then reviewing maybe some of the past permits about how that process went. Okay. That would all be good feedback.
What would constitute this committee would be my big question that I would ask, that I would be concerned about. Yeah. Let's see. Hang on, wait. Let me get Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was doing some research to prepare for this discussion, what I looked at with the ICC is that it is the most widely adopted set of codes across the United States. In the adoption of the 2021 codes, there were more than 13,000 voting members across the United States, and about 725 of them were members that were voting in Texas. Given that they are the most widely adopted codes across the United States, given the number of people that already considered them and recommends their adoption as the best practices, I would have a hard time wanting to put together another committee to review the decisions of the 13,000 committee members that have already reviewed the codes and recommended them as the best practice. As I looked around within Texas, the vast majority of the municipalities that I looked at that identified those codes did make amendments to the codes, whether it be to the electrical, fire, plumbing, et cetera, in order to make them applicable to their local situation. So what we in Universal City have done is taken those ICC codes as a baseline for basic services and life safety measures, and then adopted them, as Councilmember Shelby pointed out, that we've taken them and adopted them to our unique situation, given our fire department, given our plumbing system, given our sewer system, etc. So we are certainly not unique within the state of Texas in having made several amendments to the codes as we adopt them to make them more restrictive. To your point about the larger municipalities that are over 100,000 are required to have these committees, they bring in paid committee members. So I think if we're asking for volunteers, that's going to limit the pool of people that would be willing to come in and do something like this, as opposed to putting together a paid committee of experts that are applying for this, and that's their full or part-time job for several months, something like that. The people that are going to be the most qualified to be on a committee like this, I don't think would be willing to volunteer their time to put that in. That was all I had, I think, and open for
additional
Okay,
discussion.
Mr. Bear and then Mr. Shelby.
Thanks, sir. So, Michael, does our building department meet with contractors on a annual, semi-annual basis to get their feedback on the processes of the city?
It's an ongoing process. We don't have a specific set of meetings that we have with the construction industry, but obviously Jacqueline, myself, will talk to anybody who would like to. One thing I would like to point out is that I constantly challenge our building official.
Mike, bring the mic to you.
Oh, yeah. Hold the mic up to your, yeah, there you go.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Almost
Okay.
louder.
So one thing I want to point out is that I constantly challenge our building official because I hear feedback, right? When they don't like her decision, it comes to me. And so I'm constantly talking to Jacqueline when I hear a complaint from a contractor because they don't like the code or the interpretation of the code. I have her point out, she has to justify everything that she does. That's one thing I've emphasized since I've been here. You need to justify and point to the section of the code. It's not arbitrary. You can't just go with what you think it should be. It has to be what is in the code. So constantly having her demonstrate to me and justify the decisions that she's made. Now, the code does allow for some flexibility in certain things like materials, okay? There's an alternative materials, alternative use clause in the code. So wherever there is some gray area, we are open to being flexible to try and reach an agreement and get to the end outcome because we're not here to stifle construction or development. We want to work with folks. But we also hear a lot of people complain just because they have a chip on their shoulder and they don't want to comply with the code because they may get away with something in another town that is not following the rules.
Yeah. So I would really, while we're talking about forming a committee to review the building code, I don't know if it's the code that people have the biggest issue with, but it's the process of going through a building project, having to get the permit, having to meet, having to agree with the code. Now, Phil, you're talking, Councilmember Vaughan, you're talking about an understanding of those codes, and I'm in somewhat of agreement that we do need to have some type of understanding of what's in those codes for whenever they do get tired of me and I'm not on here. And you just have to trust Michael. You can't trust Michael. You'll just have to trust their best judgment on this. So there does need to be something out there, and I'm looking for basically a solution that would kind of help educate them from the other side, right, from the contractor side, and how can that be brought into the council to educate council on what is going on here on a daily basis. The military has the after-action review. Is there any instance of any type of after-action review for a construction process? We have one in our office after every project. What do we do good? What do we do bad? Where can we improve? Is there anything like that you could see implementing between the city and a contractor or a building owner? Is there along those lines?
Well, that would add an additional layer of bureaucracy and time spent by staff after the fact. The approach that we've taken since I've been here is that it's fluid. So when we have issues that come up during the construction process, during the permitting review process, and the actual inspection process, we try and make adjustments as needed. Again, we will listen to the contractors and try and find a solution. That is really the approach that we've taken. So we do not have that type of after-action committee right now.
I'm just wondering if it's something that we couldn't put in our, if it's some sort of questionnaire that we couldn't put in our building permit package that says, at the end of this, if you would like to submit some sort of comments to come back and that sort of thing to give you all an understanding of where the contractor hit, where didn't hit. I don't know if that's if it's something that everybody would submit or not, but. And I'm not saying you're going to fire somebody over one bad comment, because I would be fired. So I just, I think that's important to understand what the contractors have an issue with, and that we can put that out there. I do know that in a lot of sections of the code that it does say that the code official has the final authority, regardless of what everything else in here is saying, is that your code official has that final authority. And it's that way for a reason, because exactly like Councilmember, well, a couple of them said, is that it is down to a local level. We have that international, that state, county, and then your local authority. So I get that, and I totally understand that, and I'm still struggling with who's on this committee and what they're doing. I'm back onto the building and construction side, and Councilmember Vaughan is wanting this to be about codes, and I think this needs to be all gelled into one item, and I don't know what that is yet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't asked this question. I know it's kind of a leading one, but have our codes stifled new buildings in our city? How many houses have we built in the last year, several years?
So we've had a lot of tear downs. I would say half a dozen tear downs in the last 3 years and rebuilds. So it hasn't stifled those contractors. We've had a couple of contractors who didn't like the code, but they eventually complied. And we have more than a handful of contractors that do comply and don't have those same issues.
Well, so, and we've had new housing developments. So I mean, not just one house, two house. I mean, neighborhoods have been built following our codes.
Yes, absolutely. We've had Orchard Park. We've had KB, Cabano Ridge.
Okay, so there are contractors, that is very clear that there are contractors that are willing to build to our code requirements, as they are now.
Yes.
Okay. Look, I think what we could consider doing, what we may need to consider doing, I still don't think we need a committee. I think we are the committee. I think maybe next go around when it comes up, here's the codes, here's what ICC wants, which, you know, ICC has their opinion, and their opinion is based upon the big picture, as Mr. Goolsby stated. And our team focuses a little bit more on the micro level to our city limits. And I think we did this a little bit. We probably could have done it a little bit more in hindsight, in retrospect. But I think what we can do maybe better is if we start a little bit further in advance with what the amendments are going to be, and maybe we spend a little bit more time discussing the amendments and why we, in a way, why we chose to change that one. And I know we did that, but we tried to squeeze it into like 2 meetings, and it was a little rushed. And I remember, I know why we did that. Things were kind of moving quickly. I think planning long-term, the council can be advised. I would hope that we could be educated on your perspective and your opinion about why you want to do a 500 square foot building with a sprinkler system. And then we can make the decision as the deciding body to say, no, we don't agree with that. We would like that taken out before we're going to approve the codes. I feel like we have the power to do that, and we are the committee to handle that in a way. We are the elected body to handle said changes or concerns. I think it would also be easier for you to educate us rather than having another committee come in, bring their opinions. They may or may not be citizens. They may or may be, they may be builders that want to make their life a little bit easier so they can make a little bit more profit. They have homeowners that want to make their life a little bit easier so they don't have to spend quite as much. Maybe we can cut some corners here and there. I kind of depend on you guys as the third party, the people that have to be responsible for how buildings are built and signing off on the designs and signing off on the changes and or new builds. But we're here to oversee that. Like this body is here to provide citizen overview of the city staff. And I think what we just need to do is maybe spend a little bit more time next go around, start a little bit earlier, and start talking through, hey, these are the amendments we want to make, here's why we want to make them, and we may have questions. Sometimes they may be dumb because we just don't know. And I would say I'm more ignorant of how that's done. Please educate me. Help me understand why you want to accomplish that. And I think if we have that kind of communication going forward, I think we can be very successful at making sure we're protecting our citizens, making sure we're building safe buildings and structures and plumbing and electricity, and at the same time not stifling new business, preventing our customers from being able to expand their homes or remodel their homes, and finding that balance. I just think we can do that ourselves. That's my opinion. I'll stop talking for tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, I think that a lot of this is making a lot of sense. I personally think that, as Councilmember Shelby says, we are the committee. You guys are the committee. And that's why we're elected to represent our citizens. And I think it's critically important for us to remain in that capacity. Again, my question, again, to Councilmember Vaughan is, who would constitute this committee? I had no clue that a lot of these groups are paid because they're professionals in what they do. And I'm sure that could probably be worked around that a little bit as well. But I tend to agree that I believe we are the committee. There's 6 of you and myself. And so, but I also think that if we give it some more time down the road, we'll be much better prepared for the next review. And we have to rely on our fire people. We have to rely on our code compliance people. That's what they're paid for. That's their job. They look out for the best interest they can of the citizens. But in fact, is there an avenue for some outside participation? Yes, there is. And one of them is to come right up here and speak to us every time that they have something that's coming up. And maybe we needed to expand on that and not limit it to the shortest period of time that we did. We relied on our experts. And I personally think you guys made the right decision. Well, because you guys weren't on council yet, but the council in place made the right decision at the time. And this is obviously something we can take a look at down the road. Again, that is our choice. And what we've all looked at is, yes, ICC sets the codes. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of them do that. We are a home rule city. Home rule city. We have the ability that some other cities do not have to make changes based on what we think will fit in our municipality. But as a home rule city, we have the ability to modify some of those codes. So that's my opinion there as well. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say, Councilor Shelby's comment that there's been a lot of concerns about the qualifications of this committee, but you could say the same thing with the exception of Councilmember Goolsby, that there's quite concerns about the qualifications of this committee to be able, or this council, to review the codes. And so I don't think more input is bad, but whatever input that is would not be detrimental to us. And I guess I'm hearing opposition to the idea. I guess I would just like to know in general if that's where all of you stand, so that we don't have to talk about this again, if this is not something that you guys really want to pursue, at least at this time, so that we can put it to bed. If there's, I like Councilmember Goolsby's idea to get feedback from permit holders, and I don't know if it's possible for us to reach out to recently closed permits and ask them their feedback. If we don't need a committee, if we as council members could possibly do that, that's not a privacy issue. But I would like to know from just temperature check, is there any interest in reviewing our building codes that were just adopted and the processes that the city's using?
Yeah. Okay.
With that question, I'm really like how well spoken Mr. Williams, Mr. Shelby was, and I really do think, given more time and citizens to be heard, being able to go through that process longer is and this council going through that, having a longer time and more input would be the way to go. So I would not be in favor of that, of forming another council or forming another committee.
Okay. I think he's asking what you all individually feel, whether we should pursue this to the next extent. Okay. So I think it's fair for you all to give Mr. Vaughan your opinion as to whether we should consider continue or not, and maybe look at it down the road, but as of right now, do you want to pursue it?
No.
I think there's two of you for sure that say no, Mr. Bear.
This isn't one I want to put to rest at the moment, but I do want to push for some type of understanding of what the issues are from people, and I don't know if it's I don't know if the committee is the answer, but you said it. I mean, people have the opportunity to come up here and talk, but when I'm out there and I hear people that are like, well, no, Universal City's hard to deal with. No, I haven't talked to them. That's frustrating, and we need to find a way to fix that. And I don't know exactly how we do that other than to talk to the builders, to talk to the developers, the gentleman that was up here tonight. You know, what has he heard? How is he feeling about this process? I don't know if a committee is the answer, but further discussion is needed on this item, on how do we improve our the optics of developing a new city.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add something else to my discussion from before. One, my stepfather was a general contractor and did a lot of work all around the Southern California area. He rarely spoke nicely about any type of code inspector. So I think in general there is an adversarial relationship between, and I think it's a necessity that there's a bit of a push and pull that the general contractor tries to get as much done for as low cost, and it's the code inspector's responsibility to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that everything is done. The other thing I'd like to add is that when I was going around knocking on people's doors a couple months ago, a lot of people said those same things. What Councilmember Shelby pointed out, that there's contractors who are unwilling to come and do work in Universal City. And I said, which ones? Can you tell me which? And they said, well, we wanted to have sprinkler work done after Snowmageddon. And I said, which sprinkler company was it? And they could never remember. So what I've asked people to do is send me emails to my council member email address with specific companies that do not want to do business in Universal City, because anecdotal evidence not based on personal knowledge, 100% knowledge of a specific contractor that doesn't want to do business in Universal City, I'd like to hear from that contractor and hear why, so that we can set them down with Michael Casada and Jacqueline to try to come to some sort of resolution. To give you the answer, Phil, I am not in favor of setting up another council at this point, but I agree that if I'm up on this dais again, the next time the codes come around for renewal, I would like to start the process earlier, maybe have some special open meetings where we can maybe, if we can figure out a way to do it, to engage with those contractors who wish to come forward and speak to us about the codes, so that we can get that input, I think, that you said, which is what you're seeking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That would be a possibility, for sure. Mr. Neville, you want to weigh in?
No, I'm just concerned that some of the problem might be that the code compliance officer is strict. And of course, I think code compliance officer has to be strict. However, one of my neighbors had a new water heater put in, and when the inspector came around, the inspector, well, you know, that thing needs a screw. And the guy didn't put in the screw. Well, that's fine for the owner, for the water. Why couldn't you just say, hey, let me help you put a screw in there and solve the problem? See, that there is a difference between strictness and a little bit of levity to get things done. If it's strictness of code, somehow we have to address that.
I think the general consensus is that we don't want to abandon the process. We want to take a deeper look at it, because I think some of the comments made this evening by all of you are legitimate, and we need to consider those, especially. Again, I go to the point that I think you guys are the council. You guys are the ones that are elected to help our citizens make the decisions for them. And again, the only people that are professionals in the codes are the professionals. And so I think at this point, rather than continue on in the discussion, and we're not going to table this, I don't want to drop it. I don't want to drop it, but I think at this point, we should look at what's down the road for all of us in the future. We do have a mechanism with the Board of Appeals, the Board of Adjustment, to act on some of these actions. Maybe part of it is more education to our own citizens. It says if you have a complaint, if you've got something that you think is critical, let us know. We'd be glad to look at it. That's why you come and tell us how you feel about specific issues. And we can take it from there. Okay. No?
Yeah.
No, thanks for bringing it up. I mean, this is what this is all about. Our situation is all about, and I appreciate your willingness to bring this forward, and I applaud you for that. And we're gonna continue to look at it. It's not something for action at this moment, but it's definitely something I can discuss with the city manager and with Michael. And if we see something that we can continue to pursue, we'll do it. And council will always be involved in that decision. That's just the way it is for all of us. Okay. All right. That concludes our business for this evening. And now, Mr. Casado, do you have anything to bring up on behalf of the city?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Buck, you get to start off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From my most recent Meet and Message event, I'd like to bring some comments from the residents that engaged with me on Sunday and ask Michael and perhaps Randy a couple of questions that came up. Randy, do you have an estimate of what is the current wait time, if you will, for maintenance requests? If a resident notes that a sidewalk is broken, a curb, something like that, what is the normal turnaround time from the time that the citizen notifies the city to the time that it's fixed?
Mayor, do you want me to have
Well,
a discussion?
Technically, we're not supposed to have discussion and recourse between us and staff during this. This is your chance to make some comments, but not to try to get their feedback. So this is an offline one thing that we can do. And then my suggestion is get the information from Randy and then report it back to us at the next council.
Very well, sir. Thank you. Then in that case, I will brief to the council members what came up during my Meet and Message event, if that's sufficient.
Yes.
Some of the residents asked the question about how far we are, what is the current wait time for maintenance requests to be fulfilled by the city, street sidewalks, benches in the parks, for instance, if something is brought to the city's attention, what is the general turnaround time for that? And the other thing that was brought up was cars parked in such a manner in their driveway that they are blocking the sidewalk. It is a violation of the city ordinances to be blocking the sidewalks. So some of the residents who have difficulty moving around are senior citizens. The potential is there for somebody to injure themselves having to move around those cars, and whether or not the city is going around actively enforcing it, or are they waiting for residents to draw it to the city's attention. That's all I have for that from the Meet and Message stuff. My history for the week of Universal City. Yesterday, in 1930, that was 92 years ago, Randolph Field was dedicated on June 20th in 1930, even though construction was only about half completed. And the other thing was on June 18th of 1963, the City Council, being only 3 years old, approved the hiring of its first full-time city marshal. His name was Johnny Maxwell, and his salary was to be $300 per month. But he was going to get a $150 a month expense account, so that covered a few of his expenses. That draws to a conclusion, Mr. Mayor, my comments for the evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Historian. You're doing a great job. Appreciate it. Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, Phil, I appreciate that. It was a great discussion. We enjoyed the whole the whole, codes and where we're at and giving us something else to think about. So I don't know how we do that, but I really want to push forward with how do we improve the city's, the way the city is viewed from outside. I'm not saying we need to fix that right now, I'm just saying we need to fix it and figure out how to fix it. I think as a guy that deals with y'all regularly, I believe you're doing a great job. Every time we've had issues, there's processes in place to come to a resolution or education of people. So I thought that was great. Councilmember Maxwell, previous Councilmember Maxwell, stepped in tonight and kind of threw something out there that I was curious about with the open meetings or the open records requests. And I know that it would be interesting to kind of get a handle on that. I don't know if that's something that we have a discussion, ask for a consensus.
I can tell you that when there's an open records request and it's fulfilled, they let the requestor know how much time was spent producing the information.
Okay, but basically it's one of those things that he was asking that be put on the agenda as an item to discuss. Or as information to the council. Is that information that can be disclosed out for public dissemination? I can't ask you that question. Dang it, we should start it.
No, if it's a legal question, I think I hear you what you're saying. The answer is we could probably find some mechanism where if council would like to know when there are things that are happening, the request. Not by a particular individual, but by numbers.
Well,
that could be potentially brief, and I'll discuss that with the city.
And I'm a little jealous right now because people have asked for consensus items, and I've never asked for a consensus item. I want to talk about this with y'all openly. Can I get a consensus to put something like that on the agenda?
I think you got your consensus.
Yeah.
So let's put it on a future agenda to discuss that whole concept of open records.
You just want to shut me up.
That's all I have, Mr.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. We do, when the person does request it, when they get the information, we tell them exactly how much time is spent putting that information together. But let's go and pursue the discussion, because maybe some of you are not familiar with that. So, okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I want to commend Regina and Roy and Kristen for putting on a great event today. Also with Michael, with the opening of our new hotel, 14th Green, of our golf course. Exception. And that place is going to be a fabulous place to stay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Neville's referring to the Marriott Town Suites that just opened up a couple of weeks ago on the access road to I-35, the only property on I-35 that's owned by Universal City. And they just had their grand opening today. It was a spectacular event. It's a great, beautiful hotel. Really, really nice. Marriott done it good, right?
They're already want to get TxDOT involved, getting a way to get from their place over the other side of the road, all the way down to Evan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I was at that event. The hotel is absolutely beautiful. We got to go through the rooms. Everything is modern. There was no expense spared on this. It's a beautiful property that I think Universal City is going to be proud to have part of its part of the businesses here. And as far as I'm concerned, what it's going to do for the city, what the potential it has to do for the golf course is immense. And I just look forward to further business. And I look forward to spending my first night out there just because. Anyway, it was beautiful. The people there and that were in charge of the project, from what I could see, are not only looking at the profitability and it's a hotel, but very much personally concerned in the well-being of Universal City and the interaction between the business and Universal City itself. I'm very glad to hear that, and gave me a great feeling on that. I want to thank everybody in the staff for putting on such a fantastic Splash Fest. It was hot, but we also had the slides going down. Everybody enjoyed it. It was packed. There was a lot of people there. A lot of people carried over to the Movies in the Park event afterward. I never enjoyed a shower so much until that night because I was sticking to myself. But we had a great time, and Regina, you and the staff was always just bang up, and there were some complications, and I'll tell you what, if there's a complication and you want to get something past Regina, you better watch yourself. She gets things done, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Single Heart for bringing up some points about the library, where we had a good discussion on that as well. And you stole my thunder because Tom, you brought this up. I was not really. You got me thinking about. I don't know what that cost is. You brought up about adding a part-time position. You never really. Anytime you talk about adding people, to the payroll, not a great discussion. But is that something we need? I'm not aware of what that's costing. And I would really like to know as on a time basis, how that is working and how much time we're putting into that. And the point was well taken. So, yes, I want to bring it up for further discussions. Well, anyway, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing for me today.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just since Councilman Najarian and Councilman Goolsby, that guy, nobody can remind me, brought it up. I think it's a great idea that the city maybe consider, like, into his consensus. I would just like, I think the goal here would be some kind of monthly report showing time spent, demand on current staff, since I know all of our staff members have multiple jobs. Nobody just does one job here. And if we need to find money to hire somebody. I agree also with, I think Mr. Buck brought this up, the problem with blocking the sidewalks. I walk a lot. The majority of the time, it's mobile home trailers that they park that don't fit in their driveway, and they stick all the way out down the street, and you have to walk around them. I'm very able, and this is not so much of a problem for me to just walk through their grass and then onto the street and then walk back on, but for anybody who struggles, I think it's worth considering that we probably should, we've got, I'm not saying that the police need to go do it, but they could probably go, hey, we should probably have somebody swing by this house and talk to that homeowner and say, hey, look, you can't put your trailer home or your mobile home that blocks, and that's usually what it is a boat, a trailer home. The majority of the time that's what I see, and it gets a little arduous to try and work around that. Okay, so we're down to less than one thing. I think the main thing is that I want to make sure that items that require education on the part of the council, because we do need to be educated. We don't do this every day. We're here the first and the third Tuesday of every month, and in budget season. That's it. You guys do this Monday through Friday, 7 to 6. I know you guys are here until 6 o'clock at night. Like, it's all you guys do. Just like, and it's not just codes. It's the audit report. I've brought up many times in the past. I mean, I'm not saying this. You guys are doing this on purpose. I'm just thinking in the future. Let's think about having enough time to actually educate us on what you're asking us to approve, rather than just bring us something, saying, hey, we're under the gun, we have to pass this by tomorrow, and we have, you know, a period of 6:30 to, you know, most of us would like to be in bed before 11, to discuss it. And so I think my request on the part of the city would be, please, you guys know this is coming. Let's get it on an earlier one, so if we do have questions, if it does need to come back, we don't feel under the pressure to make a motion, approve it, and move on because it has to be done. That would just be my request. And then the final thing, because, you know, why not kill the horse again? I always call up to the city when I need a contractor to do something and go, hey, who follows our codes? Who does what they're supposed to and pulls permits, and who does that work? And they have a huge list online for every trade. I'll call them. And then I avoid all of those problems. And, you know, I may spend a little bit more money, but I'll spend a little bit more money to make sure it's done right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around this late.
It is publicized that many of the contractors that we have, that is public knowledge, and that is available for any of you that are interested in knowing who some of the various contractors are for any types of items that you wanted to have done or work on your home or whatever it may be. It's available. On the agenda, the agenda is not the staff's agenda, it's not my agenda, it's our agenda. So if we feel there is something we would like to have included, this is the process. And Councilmember Vaughan, you're one of the first ones that brought it up. We've had this other times before, but this is your items that you believe are important that we need to look at as a council, even if it's just a discussion. That's exactly what this is all about. So it is not anybody's specific agenda, it is our agenda. And so I'll let you have a comment in a second. Okay. In the audit report, you will receive it early. I will let you know that you will be receiving it early, so you'll have a chance to review it a little more detail. That's a very, very good, solid point. It's important, I think, for us to have a little more time to look at this, and so you will be getting that before the fact. Okay, it's going to take place. All right. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming this evening. I really appreciate it. The events for this weekend and today were really spectacular, and I can tell you that the folks from Marriott and the company that's managing it they're really happy to be in UC. They're really happy. They've got a great location. I mean, it's right off of 1604 and 35. And in the first 2 weeks of their opening, they've been averaging over 70 room nights, which is for a new hotel, that is pretty spectacular. Pretty spectacular. Okay, Barry, you want to last comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to clarify that it's not a preferred list, it's an approved vendors list. It's not a recommendation.
Right.
It's not a recommendation.
It's vendors that have been approved by the city to do business. Yeah,
that's all I need. Thank you.
Good clarification. Yes. Vendors that have been approved by the city to do business, not recommended vendors. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. Really appreciate it. It is 8:38. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yes, first.